Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Breaking news, Titan fragments have been found. It looks like there really is no hope for any survivors. The landing frame and the rear cover of the sub have been found, and this suggests that it may well have imploded at some height above the Titanic wreck, and then the lighter, more buoyant aspects, where the crew actually, which would have had oxygen inside it, that may have blown along with the current or perhaps even crashed into the structure. It could, and in terms of that part of the vehicle, that could also simply be covered in silt, certainly for the moment. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. I'm also discussing developments of the case on Patreon, so head to patreon.com/TCRS. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So certainly the good news is that they seem to have found something. I mean, that was really necessary all along, is where is this vehicle? And I think it won't be very long before the rest of the vehicle is found. Obviously, it helps provide kind of a ground zero. Closer examination of these fragments will probably also indicate whether they dislodged or in what way they dislodged. Was there some sort of violence? Was it a sort of a crash? What was the situation? Now, there's kind of a disturbing intertextuality to this whole idea. You might say, wow, I think this idea of an implosion is really fantasy, science fiction. I don't think that it could happen. I don't think it did happen. Well, it has actually happened during previous testing. According to the Washington Post, and I will put a link to that article in the description, there was a test that validated OceanGate's approach to detect flaws in the hull by using sensitive acoustic monitoring. And what the whole idea with this was that it could detect crackles and pops and strains as the pressure was brought to bear on the hull. You may know, certainly from my coverage and from whatever you've been watching elsewhere, that Titan had a 5-inch thick, that's about 12.5 centimeters thick carbon fiber hull designed to descend 4,000 meters, right? And that's what there's been a lot of speculation about this kind of experimental use of carbon fiber. I've just put up a episode about another vehicle, the Alvin, but that had a 2-inch thick, completely titanium hull, and that is the sort of industry standard titanium. But of course, that is a lot more expensive, and so they were trying to make this with lighter materials, and they were experimenting with a combination of titanium and carbon fiber. And this seems to be the result, is that we've discovered that it doesn't work. And one person who didn't agree with this approach was David Lockridge, a guy, I think he's from Glasgow, a Scottish previous director of marine operations. He wrote in the 2018 lawsuit that this material could subject passengers to potential extreme danger. And the idea that you could sort of, monitor the potential strain on this material in real time was Stockton Rush's kind of response to it. Like if there's any danger, well, we'll know about it in time. But that is not what Lockridge thought would happen, and it is likely, I think, that Lockridge was possibly correct, because he said the following: this type of acoustic analysis would only show when a component is about to fail. In other words, when it was at imminent failure. And he even used the words, he said, often milliseconds before an implosion, and that would not detect any existing flaws prior to putting pressure onto the hull. He said that after he was fired in a wrongful termination claim. And then the question is, was he correct in that assertion? In other words, how much help is it getting acoustic analysis, getting a warning milliseconds before an implosion? And I think a potential answer to that is, if that is exactly what happened, was there then time for the crew either to respond or to communicate what is about to happen to the Polar Prince directly above? And what do you think the answer is? So although we're still waiting for information, unfortunately, a catastrophic failure of carbon fiber is all too likely. And as I say, I wasn't sure even whether to report on it, but when I heard Dr. Gallo talking about someone that he heard, something that he heard about, where someone said they thought they heard an implosion right at the time that they lost communication, I sort of wondered, wow, that is a huge... that's something very huge, and why has no one spoken about that? And now it seems to be borne out in terms of where we are right now. It's possible that they didn't want to worry the families unnecessarily, and perhaps they also wanted the search to, be sort of full steam ahead and be as hopeful as possible. As far as I'm concerned, you really need to be realistic when you do these sort of searches, and be practical. You need all the information that you can possibly have and not turn it into kind of a PR exercise. The Coast Guard is due to give a press conference at 3 p.m. local time. So if any of you can find a link to that, please copy and paste it in the comments. In conclusion, what I want to say about this is, you kind of get the idea that the captain of the ship, basically the CEO of this enterprise, Stockton Rush, was warned by his staff, and that's really the next phase of our analysis here. Is this an accident or is it negligence? What is the situation? But the fact is, and we know this through the documentation, that the CEO was warned, and guess what? There's an interesting intertextuality here with the Titanic itself. Did you know on April 14th, 1912, the day of the disaster, the day the Titanic sank, it received 7 iceberg warnings. But the captain, proud and puffed up, decided to keep this marvel of modern engineering, to keep the Titanic going at full speed. Had he simply maintained course and just slowed down a tad, disaster could have been averted. 1,000 lives could have been saved. But he was proud and he was impatient, and he wouldn't listen to reason. And I think that's a lesson we can possibly learn out of this, is sometimes you need to be patient. Sometimes you need to be modest. Sometimes you need to be willing to spend more money or incur greater cost in order to be sure, in order to avert disaster. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.
By the time we're done testing it, I believe it's pretty much invulnerable.
And that's pretty much what they said about the Titanic.
That's right.